A rich man, in an act of revenge against his rival, decides to steal his most valuable possession, a majestic white horse. He ties the animal to a solitary tree in a scorching desert and abandons it to suffer. The poor horse struggles to stay, conscious, but has lost all hope due to severe dehydration. An entire day passes, and when it seems to be the animal's final moments, a small beggar girl finds it while searching for supplies. With a heavy heart, she decides to share her only bottle of water with the horse, not imagining that this decision would forever change both their destinies. When the millionaire's men discover that the plan has failed, they begin a relentless pursuit. What happens next defies everything you believe to be possible. Before we continue, if you, like us, love animals, subscribe now to our channel so you don't miss any exciting stories. Thank you. Let's get back to our story. The unforgiving midday sun beat down on the arid landscape, heat hazes shimmering. On the horizon, making the world look like a broken mirror, a small, thin girl, no more than 8 years old, walked with determined steps along the dirt road that snaked between two distant settlements. Her once colorful dress was now a faded rag that barely protected her tanned skin from the relentless heat. Her dark hair, tangled by the wind, was tied back in a makeshift ponytail with a piece of string. Maria, as she called herself, though she wasn't sure if it was her real name, carried a half-empty water bottle and a mended cloth bag where she kept her few belongings. Her large, expressive eyes constantly scanned the horizon, searching for signs of danger or help, a habit learned from years of surviving on the streets. The hot wind blew mercilessly, carrying fine grains of sand that stung her exposed skin. Maria was used to this routine, crossing the desert between settlements, in search of work, food, or any help she could find. Her small, calloused hands were proof of the hard work she performed, washing clothes, sweeping yards, feeding animals, any task that earned her a few coins or a plate of food. It was during one of these crossings that something unusual caught her attention. In the distance, a lone tree stood out in the monotonous landscape, its dry leaves rustling faintly in the wind. But it wasn't the tree itself that made Maria deviate from her usual path. It was what was tied to it, a magnificent white horse, its once sleek coat now caked with desert dust. Approaching cautiously, Maria felt her heart clench. The animal was in terrible condition. Its ribs showed beneath the dusty coat, its head hung in clear exhaustion, and the rope tethering it was so tight it had left deep welts on its neck. Its eyes, though weary, still held a spark of nobility that contrasted sharply with its current situation. "How could anyone do this to you?" Maria whispered, her voice trembling with indignation. The horse lifted its head slightly at the sound of her voice, its eyes meeting hers. In that moment, something inexplicable happened. An instant connection formed between the streetwise girl and the thoroughbred horse, as if both recognized in the other the same struggle for survival. Without hesitation, Maria placed her bag on the ground and approached the animal. The horse showed no fear or aggression. On the contrary, it seemed to relax slightly at her proximity. With nimble fingers, she began to work on the knots securing the rope, murmuring words of comfort as she struggled with the cruel bonds. "Don't worry, I'll get you out of there," she promised, her determination growing with each undone knot. "Nobody deserves to be tied up like this, especially not you." The horse responded with a soft nicker, as if it understood every word. It was during this process that Maria noticed something gleaming on the animal's neck, a metal tag with symbols and numbers she couldn't comprehend. Her fingers traced the engravings on the metal, and though she couldn't read, she sensed it meant the horse belonged to someone important. The sun continued its relentless march across the sky, and Maria knew she had to make a crucial decision. Her own water bottle was half empty, and she still had a long way to go to the next town. Helping the horse meant compromising her own survival, but something inside her, perhaps the same force that had kept her alive all these years, wouldn't let her abandon the animal to its fate. With hands trembling slightly, Maria opened her water bottle. The precious liquid shimmered in the sunlight, each drop worth its weight in gold in this hostile environment. First, she wet her own parched lips, taking just enough to moisten her throat. Then, with infinite care, she offered the rest to the horse, which drank eagerly, its eyes expressing a gratitude words could not convey. "Now it's you and me," Maria declared, her voice firm despite the fear beginning to creep into her chest. The horse, though free from the ropes, remained by her side, as if sealing a silent pact. Together, they would face the unforgiving desert, two survivors united by fate and the cruel indifference of men. The sun was beginning its descent on the horizon when Maria realized she needed to find shelter. Her legs ached from walking, and the horse, though free of its bonds, still showed clear signs of weakness. Surveying her surroundings, the girl noticed a group of birds flying eastward, a sign her desert experience had taught her to value. "Let's follow the birds," she murmured to the horse, gently stroking its neck. "They always know where to find water." The animal responded with a soft movement of its head, as if it understood. Maria gently grasped the horse's dusty mane, guiding it with kindness. To her surprise, the animal followed her without resistance, its steps weak but determined. The path was different from the route Maria usually took between the towns. This area of the desert was unfamiliar to her, which made her heart beat faster with apprehension. Shadows began to lengthen, and the wind brought with it a biting chill that contrasted sharply with the day's heat. "We need to hurry," Maria said, more to herself than to the horse. Her keen eyes picked up subtle changes in the landscape. A few hardy plants began to appear more frequently, and the terrain showed slight undulations that might indicate the presence of groundwater. Suddenly, a distant sound caught her attention. The horse noticed it too, its ears twitching nervously. It was a low, constant rumble, like a muffled roar. Maria felt her skin crawl. She knew that sound well. A dust storm was approaching. "Come on, we have to find shelter," she exclaimed, her voice betraying the fear she felt. The horse seemed to sense her urgency, and even in its weakened state, it quickened its pace. Together, they desperately searched for any rock formation that might offer protection. The wind gradually picked up, bringing with it the first gusts of sand. Maria could see the brown-orange wall approaching rapidly, swallowing the landscape behind them. Her heart pounded as she frantically searched for cover. It was then that she spotted a small depression in the ground, partially sheltered by some rocks. It wasn't ideal, but it would have to do. She guided the horse into it, positioning it so the rocks offered some protection from the wind. The storm hit them with full force. Sand flew in all directions, lashing their exposed skin. Maria, without a second thought, used her own body to shield the horse's eyes and muzzle. She pressed her face against the animal's neck, feeling the sand scratch her back through her thin dress. The horse remained surprisingly calm, as if it understood they needed to face this together. Its large body offered some protection for Maria, while she continued to shield its most vulnerable parts. The minutes dragged on like hours as the storm raged around them. Maria began to whisper an old lullaby she vaguely remembered from her life before the streets. Her voice, almost inaudible beneath the roar of the wind, seemed to soothe both the horse and herself. The words mingled with the sound of the storm, creating a strange melody of survival. When the storm finally passed, the sun had already set, leaving only a rosy glow on the horizon. Maria slowly moved away from the horse, her body aching from the position and the countless grains of sand that had abraded her skin. Her dress was even more torn, and she could feel stings burning on her back and arms. The horse shook its head, scattering sand, and then did something that surprised Maria. It gently nuzzled its muzzle against the girl's face, as if in thanks. Its large, expressive eyes seemed to hold a world of understanding. "We made it," Maria smiled, ignoring the pain in her body. "But we need to find water soon, or we won't last another day." She surveyed her surroundings, trying to get her bearings after the storm. The landscape had changed, with small dunes formed by the newly deposited sand. It was then she noticed something different on the horizon. Small pinpoints of light that hadn't been there before. Her heart leaped with hope. It could be a camp. Where there were people, there was water. However, her experience on the streets had taught her to be cautious. Not all strangers were trustworthy. The horse followed her gaze and nickered softly, as if it too had spotted the lights. Maria realized they had no choice. They had to take the risk. With legs trembling from exhaustion and thirst, she began to walk towards the lights. The horse, faithfully keeping pace. Night fell quickly over the desert, bringing with it a biting cold. Stars began to dot the dark sky, serving as silent guides for the unlikely pair advancing slowly through the desolate landscape. Maria and the horse, united by fate and the struggle for survival, walked towards the unknown, each step a small victory against adversity. The lights grew clearer as Maria and the horse approached, revealing a small encampment nestled in a shallow valley between dunes. Canvas tents, in earthy tones, formed a semicircle around a central campfire. The aroma of food cooking made Maria's stomach rumble painfully, reminding her she hadn't eaten in many hours. Though exhausted, the girl remained cautious, stopping at a safe distance to observe. Calm movements indicated the camp was settling down for the night. Soft voices conversed. She couldn't understand everything, though some words sounded familiar. They were travelers, she realized, or perhaps a family living off the beaten path, reminding her of previous encounters with similar groups during her wanderings. The horse, however, had other plans. Perhaps sensing the smell of other horses or driven by extreme thirst, it began to move towards the camp, practically dragging Maria with it. Before she could stop it, a dog barked, alerting the camp's inhabitants to their presence. "Who's there?" a man's voice called out, to Maria's relief. A middle-aged man, wearing simple, practical clothes, raised a lantern in their direction. His eyes widened at the unlikely sight, a tattered girl beside a visibly mistreated horse. "Please," Maria began, her voice hoarse from thirst, "we need water." The man frowned, not in disapproval, but in concern. More people began to approach, including an older woman with gray hair who immediately took charge. "Bring some water quick," the woman ordered, and someone hurried to obey. Turning to Maria, she spoke kindly. "Come on, child, you're safe here." Maria hesitated only for a moment, but the horse was already following the woman, as if sensing they could trust her. Soon, they were led near the campfire, where a young woman brought fresh water in a canteen for Maria and a bucket for the horse. "My name is Sarah," the older woman introduced herself as Maria drank eagerly. "I'm the matriarch of this family. That's my son, Ben," she indicated the man who had first spotted them. "Now tell us how you and this magnificent animal ended up here." As Maria recounted her story, from finding the horse tied up to facing the dust storm, Sarah and Ben exchanged significant glances. A young man approached the horse, examining the tag on its neck with growing interest. "Mom," Ben called, "this is one of the horses from Sunrise Ranch. Look at the brand, it's Arthur Randolph's." Sarah nodded gravely, recognizing the name of the famous horse breeder in the region. "Arthur's a good man," Sarah commented to Maria, while other women brought a plate of stew and bread for the girl. "He helps a lot of folks in need. This horse must have been stolen. Arthur would never allow one of his animals to be treated like this." The horse, after drinking enough water, accepted a few handfuls of hay offered by the family. Its eyes, still tired, already showed more life. Maria watched everything as she ate, feeling her body gradually relax with the warmth of the fire and the kindness of these strangers. "You did well to save him," Sarah continued, placing a blanket over Maria's shoulders. "Folks round here believe that those who show kindness to animals are blessed. Tomorrow morning, Ben will try to contact Arthur. For tonight, rest." A young woman led Maria to one of the tents, where a soft pallet had been prepared. The horse was taken to be with the other animals of the camp, where it would receive proper care during the night. Before entering the tent, Maria ran to him, hugging his neck. "Sleep well," she whispered to the animal. "Tomorrow will be a better day." The horse responded with a soft nicker, resting its muzzle on her shoulder in a gesture of affection that made the family smile. Lying on the soft pallet, covered and warm for the first time in a long while, Maria allowed herself to truly relax. The sounds of the camp, soft conversations, the crackling of the fire, the occasional nicker of horses, created an atmosphere of peace she rarely experienced. However, before falling asleep, a disturbing thought crossed her mind. What if the people who'd hurt the horse came looking for him? Her last conscious thought was a silent promise that she wouldn't let anything bad happen to her new friend, no matter what she had to do to protect him. Dawn arrived, with the characteristic softness of the desert, rosy and golden hues painting the sky as the family's camp awoke to another day. Maria woke to the aroma of fresh bread and coffee brewing, long-forgotten sensations that brought involuntary tears to her eyes. Her first concern was for the horse. Hurrying out of the tent, she found him being groomed by one of the young women. The animal looked different. His coat, though still marked by days of mistreatment, shone where it had been cleaned, and his eyes showed more vigor after a night of rest and proper feeding. "Morning, little one," called Sarah, approaching with a cup of mint tea. "Come have some breakfast. Ben is already trying to get in touch with Arthur Randolph." Maria accepted the cup gratefully, but couldn't take her eyes off the horse. "He's much better," commented the young woman grooming the animal. "This is an exceptional horse. Look how he holds that noble posture, even after all he's been through." Her words were interrupted by a sudden commotion in the camp. Ben approached quickly, his face showing concern. "Mom," he called, then switched his gaze to Maria. "There's trouble. I managed to speak with one of the ranch hands, but I got some disturbing news. The horse was stolen about a week ago, but not by ordinary thieves." Sarah frowned, gesturing for him to continue. Ben lowered his voice, but Maria, used to catching, whispered. Conversations on the streets could hear every word. It was Victor Blackwell, the owner of that luxury hotel chain. Apparently, he lost a big development deal to Arthur and swore revenge. The ranch hand said Blackwell is known for his retaliatory acts, but nobody expected something this cruel. Maria felt her heart clench. The name Blackwell wasn't unfamiliar. On the streets, she'd heard stories about this powerful man and his reputation for cruelty hidden beneath a veneer of sophistication. "What will we do?" asked Sarah, her eyes expressing motherly concern for both the horse and Maria. "Blackwell is a dangerous man, with a lot of pull in these parts." As if answering the question, a dust cloud on the horizon announced the approach of vehicles. Ben ran to the highest point near the camp, returning with a grave expression. "Two big SUVs, the kind Blackwell uses. They're looking for the horse, I'm sure of it." The camp sprang into immediate motion, like a disturbed anthill. Sarah began to give quick orders. "Maria," called the matriarch, her voice firm but gentle, "you need to leave now. Blackwell has men everywhere, and it won't be safe for you or the horse to stay here. Ben knows an alternate route that can get you to Arthur's ranch, but you need to leave immediately." Fear tightened Maria's chest, but years on the streets had taught her to act quickly in dangerous situations. In minutes, a small backpack was prepared with water, food, and a rudimentary map drawn by Ben. "Head east, keeping that rock formation to your right," Ben instructed, pointing to a distant series of cliffs. "There's a hidden spring about a half-day's ride from here. You can rest there, but don't stay too long. The ranch is a 2-day journey in that direction." As Maria mounted the horse, now strong enough to carry her, Sarah approached with a cloth bundle. "This belonged to my daughter when she was your age," she said, revealing a simple but sturdy dress and a scarf for protection against the sun. "And take this too." She placed a small charm around Maria's neck, "for protection on your journey." The vehicles were already close enough to hear the rumble of their engines. With help from the family, Maria and the horse departed quickly, following a trail partially hidden among the dunes. The girl's heart beat rapidly, but there was determination in her eyes. "We'll make it," she whispered to the horse, who seemed to understand the urgency of the situation, moving with surprising agility. Behind them, they could hear raised voices in the camp. Blackwell's men had arrived. The sun was still low on the horizon when Maria looked back one last time, watching the family's camp shrink in the distance. A mixture of gratitude and fear filled her chest as she guided the horse along the route Ben had indicated. Her journey, she now realized, was far from over. In fact, the real challenge was just beginning. The sun was high when Maria decided to take her first break. The horse, though stronger after the rest at the family's camp, still needed to recover its energy. They found shelter under a rock formation that offered generous shade, and Maria dismounted carefully, her legs sore from the time on the animal. "You're doing great," she murmured to the horse, offering it water from the bottle Sarah had filled. The animal drank moderately, as if understanding the need to conserve. Maria smiled, realizing how her companion showed extraordinary intelligence. While they rested, the girl examined the map Ben had drawn. The markings were simple but clear. The rock formation she should keep to her right, the hidden spring, and finally Arthur Randolph's ranch. Her fingers traced the path on the worn paper, wishing she could read the words written in the margins. A distant sound made her blood run cold, the rumble of engines. Quickly, Maria tucked away the map and climbed onto a ledge of the rock, scanning the horizon. 2 dark specks moved across the desert, kicking up clouds of dust. They were distant, but their direction indicated they were following her trail. "We need to go," she whispered urgently, returning to the horse. The animal was already alert, its ears twitching towards the sound of the vehicles. Maria mounted quickly, and together they set off towards an area where the terrain became more rugged. The new dress Sarah had given her offered better protection against the harsh sun, and the scarf protected her head and neck. The charm bumped gently against her chest with the rhythm of the horse's gallop. Despite her fear, Maria felt a strange sense of confidence, as if the matriarch's gift truly brought some magical protection. The next few hours were an exercise in strategy. Maria guided the horse through rock formations and small valleys, trying to stay out of sight while heading in the direction indicated by the map. The animal seemed to understand the need for stealth, its hooves carefully choosing where to step to make minimal noise. During one of these evasive maneuvers, something extraordinary happened. The horse suddenly stopped, its ears pricked in a specific direction. Maria was about to urge it on when she noticed there was a very faint sound of running water. "Can you hear water?" she whispered, amazed. The horse responded with a soft movement of its head and, without needing a command, began to move towards the sound. Minutes later, they discovered a small spring hidden among the rocks, a precious gift from the desert that wasn't marked on the map. As they refilled their bottles and rested briefly, Maria realized she was developing a unique way of communicating with the animal. She no longer needed words to convey her intentions. A light touch, a shift in her posture, even a look was enough for them to understand each other. "I need to give you a name," she murmured, watching the horse drink. Its white coat, now cleaner, gleamed under the afternoon sun. "How about Star, because you shine even in the darkest hours. The horse raised its head at the sound of the name, its eyes meeting hers with an expression that seemed like approval. The moment of peace was interrupted by the distant sound of engines again. This time, however, something had changed. The noise was coming from two different directions. Blackwell's men had split up, trying to encircle them. Maria felt her heart race, but she kept calm. Star also sensed the danger, its muscles tensing beneath her. The girl quickly surveyed the surrounding terrain, remembering stories she'd heard on the streets about how smugglers managed to evade pursuers in the desert. "I trust you," she whispered to Star, leaning over its neck. "Let's show them they can't catch us." The horse responded with a soft nicker, as if accepting the challenge. With a lightness that defied its size, Star began to move among the rocks. Choosing a path that seemed impossible at first glance, Maria let herself be guided by the animal's wisdom, realizing its instincts were more reliable than any map. The sun was beginning to set when they managed to lose the vehicles, but Maria knew they couldn't let their guard down. Night was approaching, bringing new dangers. As they searched for a safe place to rest, the girl clutched Sarah's charm, whispering a prayer of thanks for the protection so far and asking for strength for the challenges still to come. Night fell over the desert like a black velvet cloak sprinkled with stars. Maria and Star had found shelter in a small natural cave, deep enough to hide them, but not so deep as to block their view of the entrance. The temperature had plummeted, as is common in the desert, and Maria silently thanked Sarah for the sturdy dress that now protected her from the cold. The girl shared some of the bread and dates the family had put in her backpack, always alert to the sounds of the night. Star remained near the cave entrance, its ears constantly twitching, like natural antennas picking up any sign of danger. "Can't sleep either, huh?" Maria whispered, approaching the horse. Star responded by gently nuzzling its muzzle against her shoulder, a gesture that had become familiar between them. The girl hugged the animal's neck, feeling the comforting warmth emanating from it. It was then that a different sound cut through the silence of the night, a distant howl, followed by others. Star tensed immediately, and Maria felt a shiver run down her spine. Coyotes. On the streets, she'd heard stories about these predators that hunted in packs, especially on the darkest nights. "They're still far off," she murmured, more to calm herself than to inform Star, who certainly already knew. However, another howl sounded, this time closer. The coyotes were moving in their direction. Maria knew they had to make a difficult decision: remain in the relative safety of the cave, where they might get cornered, or risk a nighttime escape through unfamiliar terrain. Before she could ponder further, Star made a sudden movement with its head, as if indicating something. The girl followed the horse's gaze and saw, by starlight, a trail that wound up the side of the rock formation. It was narrow and looked perilous, but it offered a possible escape route the coyotes couldn't follow. "You think we can make it?" she asked in a whisper. Star responded by taking a decisive step towards the trail. Maria understood. Her friend was willing to try, trusting its instincts and the bond they had developed. With her heart pounding, Maria mounted Star. The howls were getting closer, and now she could hear the soft sound of paws on the sand. Taking a deep breath, she held on tightly to the horse's mane. "I trust you," she whispered, and Star began to ascend the narrow trail. Every step was calculated, every movement precise. The crescent moon provided just enough light to distinguish the path, but Star seemed to see perfectly in the dark. Below them, shadows moved in the night. The coyotes had reached the cave they had just abandoned. Maria could hear their frustrated snarls as they found the shelter empty. Some of the animals noticed the movement above and began to howl, but the trail was too narrow for them to follow. The climb seemed endless. The air grew thinner as they gained altitude, and Maria had to concentrate to keep from looking down. Star moved with surprising grace, finding footing where it seemed impossible. When they finally reached the top of the bluff, the view took Maria's breath away. Under the starlight, the desert stretched out in all directions like a frozen ocean of sand. In the distance, small lights indicated civilization, maybe the next town, or perhaps even Arthur's ranch itself. But there was no time to admire the view. The coyotes, though unable to reach them by the narrow trail, began to circle the rock formation, looking for another way up. Maria quickly consulted the map in the faint moonlight. They needed to head towards the distant lights. "Come on, Star," she urged softly. "We need to put a lot of distance between us and them before dawn." The horse nodded with the movement of its head and began to trot across the rocky plateau, its hooves finding a steady, sure rhythm even on the uneven terrain. As they rode under the starry sky, Maria allowed herself a small smile. Each obstacle they overcame together further strengthened the special bond between them. The howls of the coyotes grew fainter and fainter, eventually lost in the vastness of the night. Sarah's charm tinkled softly against her chest, and Maria clutched it gratefully. The family matriarch had said it would bring protection, and so far her promise was being fulfilled. With renewed determination, girl and horse continued their nocturnal journey, two solitary silhouettes moving under the mantle of stars, ever closer to their destination. Dawn found Maria and Star descending from the rocky plateau via a gentler path than the one they had used to ascend. The rising sun painted the sky in shades of pink and orange, casting long shadows that seemed to point the way ahead. The lights they had spotted during the night were no longer visible, but Maria held her course based on the map's directions. It was during this descent that Star began to show unusual agitation. Its ears twitched constantly, and its once sure steps became hesitant. Maria noticed the change immediately. After so many hours together, she could read the horse's every signal. "What is it, friend?" she whispered, stroking its neck. Star nickered softly and changed direction, ignoring the path Maria had planned to follow. The girl was about to correct it when something caught her attention. A distant sound of hooves, many of them echoing through the valley below. Cautiously, she guided Star to a position that afforded a better view of the valley. What she saw made her heart leap. A caravan of horses was passing through, at least 24 of them, all magnificently cared for and guided by riders in smart uniforms. Star became even more agitated, its eyes fixed on the caravan. It was then that Maria noticed something extraordinary. The riders wore uniforms with the same brand that was on Star's identification tag. They were people from Arthur Randolph's ranch. Her first impulse was to run to them, but years on the streets had taught her caution. And it was this caution that saved her. Because moments later, emerging from behind a dune, appeared two familiar SUVs, the same ones that had been pursuing them the day before. Maria watched, holding her breath, as the vehicles approached the caravan. A man alighted from the first vehicle, tall, elegantly dressed, with an air of authority that emanated even from a distance. Something in his posture made Maria instinctively shrink back. "Blackwell," she whispered to herself, recognizing the man from the descriptions she had heard. Star recognized him too. Its entire body tensed, and an almost imperceptible tremor ran through its muscles. What happened next left Maria stunned. Blackwell approached the leader of the caravan with a cordial smile, greeting him as if they were old friends. His voice, carried by an occasional breeze, sounded smooth and polite. "Arthur, my friend," he said, loud enough for Maria to hear. "What a pleasant coincidence to find you here. I was just looking for you. I have information about your missing horse." The leader of the caravan, a middle-aged man with a neatly trimmed grey beard, dismounted to greet Blackwell. His face showed genuine concern. "Victor, any information would be welcome," Star isn't just a champion racer, he's family. His absence has affected us deeply. Blackwell placed a hand on Arthur's shoulder in a gesture that seemed sympathetic. That's precisely why I came personally. My men found evidence that horse thieves are trying to take him out of the state. We're tracking a street girl who was seen with him, probably an accomplice of the thieves. Maria felt her blood run cold. With horror, she watched Blackwell hand some papers to Arthur, probably forged documents to support his story. The wealthy man's plan became clear. He was turning Star's savior into the villain. Star fidgeted again, clearly, wanting to go to its true owner, but Maria held it firmly. "Not yet," she whispered, her mind working quickly. "If we show up now, he'll convince everyone I'm a thief. We need to find a way to prove the truth." It was then she noticed something that had escaped her attention before. Deep marks on Star's neck, where the tight rope had injured it. Marks that told a different story from Blackwell's version. A story of cruelty and revenge, not theft. Silently, Maria guided Star away from the valley, her heart heavy but her determination stronger than ever. They needed to find help, someone who could expose the truth about Blackwell. Sarah's words echoed in her memory. Arthur's a good man. Yes, he seemed to be. But first, they needed to find a way to reach him without falling into Blackwell's trap. "We'll find another way," she promised Star, who nickered softly in response. The sun was already high in the sky when they left the valley, carrying with them not only the weight of exhaustion, but also the knowledge that their journey had become far more complicated than they imagined. The sun was high when Maria decided to risk approaching the small town she had spotted in the distance. Her supplies were running low, and both she and Star needed rest. The last few hours had been especially draining, not just from physical exhaustion, but mainly from the weight of the discovery about Blackwell's plans. They found a small grove of date palms on the outskirts of the town, where Maria decided to leave Star hidden. "Stay here," she whispered, hugging the horse's neck. "I'll be back soon with water and food." Star nickered softly, as if understanding the need to remain concealed. Maria adjusted the scarf Sarah had given her, making sure it covered her hair well, and walked towards the town. Years of living on the streets had taught her to move without drawing attention, blending into shadows and avoiding direct gazes. The town was small, with simple, light-walled houses and flat roofs. Some women were hanging clothes to dry. Children played in the narrow alleyways, and the aroma of freshly baked bread filled the air. Maria followed this aroma to a small bakery. It was when she entered the establishment that her heart nearly stopped. On the wall, there was a poster with her picture, clearly taken by some security camera, and one of Star. Below, in large letters she couldn't read, was undoubtedly the theft accusation Blackwell had fabricated. "Can I help you?" a gentle voice asked, startling her. Maria turned quickly, meeting the kind eyes of an elderly woman behind the counter. Something in her gaze reminded Maria of Sarah. I just... Maria stammered, her instincts screaming for her to flee, but before she could move, the woman spoke again, this time in a whisper. "You're the girl from the poster, aren't you? The one with Arthur Randolph's horse." It wasn't a question. Maria felt her legs weaken, but the woman's expression wasn't accusatory. There was something else in her eyes, something like understanding. "Please," Maria began, tears welling in her eyes. "It's not what they're saying. I found him tied up, dying of thirst. He was being mistreated, and—" "Shh," the woman interrupted her gently, checking if anyone else was in the bakery. "I know, my name is Martha. Arthur Randolph is my nephew, and I know Victor Blackwell and his cruel tactics very well." Maria felt a wave of relief so intense. Her legs almost gave out. Martha quickly came around the counter, guiding her to a room in the back of the bakery. "Blackwell has been spreading his lies all over the region," Martha explained, pouring Maria some water. "But I've known Star since he was a foal. That horse would never follow someone who'd hurt him. And looking at you, my dear, I see only kindness in your eyes." "But how can I prove the truth?" Maria asked, drinking the water eagerly. "Blackwell has documents. He has important people believing him." Martha smiled, a smile that carried an ancient wisdom. "Sometimes the truth doesn't need documents. It just needs the right person to witness it." The old woman stood up, going to an old chest in the corner of the room. "Arthur will visit me this afternoon. He always does when he's looking for Star. In this area." Maria's heart leaped. "But what if Blackwell comes with him?" "Blackwell doesn't know I'm Arthur's aunt," Martha replied, rummaging through the chest. "He just sees me as the old village baker." "Ah, here it is." She pulled an old camera from the chest. "This camera has recorded Star since his first day. Arthur trusts my judgment about horses more than any document." A plan began to form in Maria's mind. "Could you see the marks on his neck? The marks from the rope that tied him?" "Better yet," Martha replied, her eyes shining. "I can photograph them, and more importantly, I can testify to the condition you found him in. Blackwell may have money and influence, but he can't buy the truth that's marked on Star's body." Maria felt for the first time in days a true sense of hope. Martha quickly prepared a bundle with bread, fruit, and water. "Go get Star and bring him through the back of the bakery. I have a small stable here I use for storing flour. You can hide there until Arthur arrives." Before Maria left, Martha held her hands. "You've done something extraordinary, child. You saved not only a horse, but exposed the cruelty of a man who has long needed to be stopped. Arthur has been looking for proof against Blackwell for years, and you, unknowingly, brought that proof to us." Maria hugged the woman, tears of gratitude streaming down her face. "Thank you," she whispered. "I was so scared." "Fear is natural," Martha replied, stroking her hair. "But courage isn't the absence of fear. It's doing what's right despite it. Now go, bring our Star home." The small stable at the back of the bakery was surprisingly comfortable, with fresh hay and clean water Martha had provided. Star seemed content with the arrangement, especially after Maria used warm water and a soft cloth, supplied by the old woman, to carefully clean the marks on his neck. "We need to record every mark," Martha instructed, adjusting her old camera. The equipment had an air of nobility in her experienced hands, like a sacred tool about to reveal a long-hidden truth. "These scars tell a story that no lie of Blackwell's can deny." As they photographed, Martha shared stories about Star from his birth. "He was always special," she recounted, capturing another angle of the marks. "Arthur named him Star, not for the white blaze on his forehead, but because his eyes seemed to hold all the stars of the desert sky." Maria listened, fascinated, realizing how each story added a new layer of meaning to her connection with the animal. Star, for his part, seemed perfectly at ease with Martha, as if recognizing an old friend in her. The sound of approaching engines interrupted the moment. Martha quickly put away the camera and peeked through a crack in the door. "It's Arthur," she whispered. "But Blackwell is with him, as I feared. Stay here and don't make a sound. I'll prepare the ground." Maria hugged Star's neck, feeling her heart pound. For the first time since she'd found the horse tied to that lone tree, they were so close to revealing the truth, and at the same time, so vulnerable. Through the cracks in the stable, Maria could see the group approaching the bakery. Arthur. Randolph had an imposing presence even from a distance, but his eyes carried a sadness that contrasted with his elegant bearing. Blackwell beside him maintained an artificial smile that made Maria's stomach churn. "Aunt Martha!" Arthur's voice sounded warm as he greeted the old woman. "As always, the aroma of your bread brings me back." "My dear nephew," Martha replied, embracing him, "and I see you've brought company." Her tone when addressing Blackwell was politely neutral, but Maria sensed an underlying iciness. "Mrs. Martha," Blackwell bowed in an exaggerated reverence, Your reputation as the best baker in the region is well deserved, but unfortunately, we haven't come just for the bread. We're looking for the stolen horse. I know, Martha interrupted, her tone now firmer. The posters are everywhere. But before we continue this conversation, Arthur, there's something I need to show you, in private. Blackwell stepped forward. Certainly, any information about the horse can be shared with me as well. After all, I'm leading the search and— Forgive me, Mr. Blackwell, Martha cut in with sharp politeness, but some family matters need to remain in the family. Arthur, come with me. Maria held her breath as she watched the scene. Blackwell looked uncomfortable with the situation, but couldn't protest without seeming rude. Arthur, after a moment's hesitation, followed his aunt into the bakery. Star shifted, restlessly sensing the tension in the air. Maria stroked his neck, whispering words of comfort. Through the cracks, she could see Blackwell pacing back and forth, checking his phone constantly. Inside the bakery, Maria imagined Martha showing the photos to Arthur, revealing the truth through the images she had captured. The minutes dragged. Unlike hours, each sound making her heart jump. Finally, the bakery door opened. Arthur came out first, his face a mask of restrained fury. His eyes, once sad, now gleamed with fierce determination. Martha followed him, carrying the camera like a silent trophy. Victor, Arthur's voice sounded dangerously calm. I think you have some explaining to do. Blackwell must have sensed something in the change of atmosphere because his face lost some of its color. Explanations I don't understand. The rope marks on a horse's neck tell a very clear story, Arthur continued, his voice growing in intensity, especially when those marks are photographed by someone who knows every scar, every peculiarity of that animal since its birth. Maria held her breath, her heart beating so loudly she feared they could hear it. Star stood completely still beside her, as if he too understood the gravity of the moment. Now, Arthur took a step towards Blackwell, are you going to tell me exactly what you did to my horse, or would you prefer I call the authorities first? Blackwell's face twisted into a mask of controlled fury. His eyes, once falsely cordial, now revealed all the cruelty Maria had imagined in him. You don't have proof of anything, Arthur, he said, his voice trembling slightly. Just some photos of marks that could have been made by anyone. By that street girl, for example. The marks tell a specific story, Arthur retorted, his voice filled with authority. The way they were made, the age of the scars, everything matches exactly the period when Star disappeared. And my Aunt Martha knows every mark on that horse since he was born. Martha stepped forward, holding up the camera. I have here the record of every scar Star has ever had in his life, including the small mark on his right hind leg, a result of an accident during his first training, a detail only the family knows. Blackwell let out a forced laugh. This is ridiculous. You're believing old photos and the words of an old woman? I have official documents proving— Your forged documents mean nothing now, Arthur interrupted. He gestured, and two men who had remained by the cars approached. These are private investigators I hired when Star disappeared. They've been gathering evidence for weeks. In the stable, Maria barely breathed, watching the scene through the cracks. Star was restless beside her, as if sensing the moment of truth had arrived. The horse took a step towards the door, but Maria held him gently. Not yet, she whispered. Wait! Blackwell looked around like a cornered animal. His eyes rested on the stable for a moment too long, making Maria's heart freeze. Even if you had some proof, he said, his voice taking on a threatening tone, you'll never find the horse. He's probably dead in the desert by now, just like I— He stopped abruptly, realizing his mistake. A heavy silence fell over the group. Arthur's face paled with anger. Just like you what, Blackwell? Arthur's voice was barely a whisper, but it carried the weight of an impending storm. Just like you planned, just like you executed, finish your sentence. It was at this moment that Star decided he had waited long enough. Before Maria could stop him, the horse pushed open the stable door with force, bursting into the courtyard with a powerful neigh that echoed through the afternoon air. Time seemed to freeze. Blackwell staggered backward, his face a mask of shock and horror. Arthur clutched his heart, tears shining in his eyes as he saw his beloved horse alive and relatively well. Martha smiled as if she had been expecting this moment. "Star!" Arthur called, his voice thick with emotion. The horse responded with another neigh but didn't run to his owner. Instead, he stood firmly beside Maria, who had emerged from the stable right behind him. "You!" Blackwell pointed at Maria, his face contorted with hatred. "You little thief! You stole my..." He stopped again, realizing he was digging himself in deeper. "Your..." Arthur took a menacing step towards him. "So now you admit you had possession of him? That you kept him tied up? That you abandoned him to die in the desert?" Blackwell backed away, his eyes darting from one face to another, looking for an escape. His bodyguards, who had been observing the scene from a distance, began to quietly distance themselves, realizing their employer was about to fall. "This girl," Martha spoke, her voice clear and firm, "is not a thief. She is a hero. She saved Star when he was dying, tied up and abandoned. She cared for him, protected him, risked her own life to keep him safe. The true marks of cruelty," she raised the camera again, "were left by you, Blackwell." Maria felt her legs tremble with the intensity of the moment. Star pressed his muzzle against her shoulder, offering silent support. Arthur looked at the two of them, understanding and gratitude replacing the anger in his eyes. "The investigators have already called the authorities," he said, turning back to Blackwell. "They're on their way. I suggest you stay here and start thinking of a good explanation for your actions. Though," he smiled humorlessly, "I doubt there is one." The distant sound of sirens cut through the tense afternoon air, announcing the arrival of the authorities. Blackwell remained in a furious silence, his eyes alternating between Maria and Star with a mixture of anger and disbelief. Arthur's private investigators had positioned themselves strategically to prevent any escape attempt. Maria kept a hand on Star's neck, both to calm the animal and herself. For the first time since starting her journey, she allowed herself to feel the full weight of exhaustion from the past few days. Her legs trembled slightly, and it was then that Martha approached, enveloping her in a motherly hug. "Come, dear," the old woman whispered, guiding her to a bench near the bakery entrance. "You need to rest a bit." Star followed their movements, refusing to stray from Maria. Arthur watched the scene with a complex expression. There was relief at finding his horse alive, gratitude for Maria's courage, and a deep sadness at seeing the marks of abuse on the animal he considered family. "How could you?" he finally asked Blackwell, his voice heavy with pain. "Not just for the money or the lost deal. How could you be so cruel to an innocent living being?" Blackwell lifted his chin in a final gesture of arrogance. "You don't understand anything, Arthur. In the business world..." "No," Arthur interrupted, his voice sharp. "Don't you dare try to justify your cruelty with business. You didn't just want to hurt me financially. You wanted to make me suffer, knowing Star was out there, suffering." The first police cars began to arrive, kicking up dust in the hot afternoon air. Martha took the opportunity to bring a glass of water for Maria and another for Arthur. "Tell us your story, little one," Martha asked gently, as the police officers began to take control of the situation. "Arthur needs to know everything that happened." Maria looked at Star, who returned her gaze with that deep intelligence she had come to know so well. In a soft voice, she began to recount her journey, the encounter under the lone tree, the decision to share her last water with the horse, the dust storm, the kind family who helped her, the coyotes, every moment of danger, and every small victory. As she spoke, Arthur approached Star for the first time. The horse allowed contact with his former owner, but remained protectively close to Maria. It was as if he recognized both as family now. "It's extraordinary," Arthur commented, his voice thick with emotion. "Star has always been an excellent judge of character. He sensed your kindness immediately, didn't he?" His eyes filled with tears when she reached the part about Maria using her own body to shield the horse during the dust storm. The police officers approached, needing to take official statements from everyone. Blackwell was led to one of the patrol cars, his mask of arrogance finally crumbling as he saw his bodyguards readily cooperating with the authorities. "Mr. Randolph," one of the investigators called, "we found more evidence on Mr. Blackwell's phone." He was so confident he didn't bother to delete his messages. There are explicit orders to his men about where to abandon the horse and how to tie him up. Maria watched the scene with a mixture of relief and apprehension. Her mission was accomplished, Star was safe, the truth had been revealed, and Blackwell would face the consequences of his actions. But a sadness began to settle in her heart. Soon, she would have to say goodbye to her traveling companion. As if reading her thoughts, Star pressed his muzzle against her face, a gesture that had become so familiar in recent days. Maria hugged his neck, allowing a few silent tears to escape. "You know," Arthur said, observing the interaction between the two, "there's an old saying among true horsemen. When a horse chooses someone, that bond is sacred." He knelt to be at eye level with Maria. "You didn't just save Star's life, you earned his trust and his love in a way few ever could." Martha smiled, placing a hand on Arthur's shoulder. "Nephew, I think you know what needs to be done." Arthur nodded, a gentle smile lighting his face for the first time that day. "Maria," he said solemnly, "would you like to come live at the ranch? We could offer you a home, an education, and," he paused significantly, "the opportunity to continue caring for Star." Maria's heart skipped a beat. She looked at Star, then at Martha, and finally at Arthur, hardly daring to believe what she was hearing. The horse nickered softly, as if giving his approval to the arrangement. The sunset painted the sky in intense colors as the last police car left Martha's bakery, taking Blackwell and all the evidence of his crimes. Maria remained seated on the bench, still processing Arthur's extraordinary offer. Star had lain down beside her, his large head resting gently in her lap, as if to ensure she wouldn't disappear. Maria began, her voice trembling with emotion. Could I really stay with him? Her fingers idly stroked Star's mane, a gesture that had become as natural as breathing. Arthur sat down beside her, his kind eyes observing the interaction between the girl and the horse. "Maria, what you did these past few days was extraordinary. It wasn't just courage, it was love in its purest form. You risked your own life to save Star, expecting nothing in return." Martha, who had briefly gone into the bakery, returned with a tray of tea and still warm cookies. "Nephew," she said, pouring the cups, "tell her about your mother." Arthur picked up his cup, a nostalgic smile appearing on his face. "My mother, God rest her soul, started our ranch from scratch. She had a special gift with horses. She used to say they could see right into our soul. When she found a mistreated horse, she couldn't turn her back." Maria sipped her tea, absorbing every word. Star moved his head in her lap, his large eyes fixed on her with that expression of deep understanding that had touched her so much since their first meeting. "The ranch began like that," Arthur continued, "as a refuge for rescued horses. Over time, it grew and became one of the most respected in the region, but we never lost our original mission to help those in need, whether they be horses," he paused significantly, looking at Maria, "or people. But I don't know anything about horses." Maria murmured, though her heart was already accepting the idea. "I can't read. I don't have any education." "That can be learned," Martha interrupted gently. "What can't be learned is what you already have naturally, a pure heart and the capacity to love unconditionally." Arthur nodded, placing his cup on the table. "At the ranch, we have a school for our employees and their children. You could study, learn to read and write, and at the same time learn all about horses. More importantly," he smiled, "you could continue your special friendship with Star." As if responding to the sound of his name, the horse lifted his head and nickered softly. Maria couldn't suppress a smile. It was the same gentle sound he had made when she found him tied to that lone tree. As if, even in that moment of despair, he already knew she was trustworthy. "There's something else you need to see," Arthur said, standing up. He walked to his truck and returned with a folder. "These are documents we found in Blackwell's office. Among them are records of other street kids he used in his schemes over the years." Maria felt her heart ache. Arthur continued, "We're thinking of expanding the ranch's educational program, creating a space especially for children who need a chance, just like you. Your story with Star showed us that sometimes the greatest acts of kindness come from the most unexpected places." Silent tears began to stream down Maria's face. Star immediately lifted his head, nuzzling her cheek as he had done so many times during their journey together, offering comfort and support. "You wouldn't be alone," Martha added, taking Maria's hand. "I live near the ranch and you'd always be welcome here. We could be your family, if you'd like." The word family echoed in Maria's heart like a distant bell, awakening long buried memories and dreams. She looked at Star, who watched her with those deep, wise eyes, then at Arthur and Martha, who waited patiently for her answer. The sun had set completely now, and the first stars were beginning to dot the desert sky. Maria thought of all the nights she had spent alone on the streets, dreaming of a place to call home. She thought of the incredible journey she had shared with Star, the extraordinary people she had met, the fate that seemed to have guided her to this moment. "Yes," she said finally, her voice small but firm. "Yes, I want to stay." Star nickered once more, as if sealing the deal, and Arthur smiled, tears shining in his own eyes. "Then it's settled," he said. "Welcome to the family, Maria." The first sight of Sunrise Ranch took Maria's breath away. After a restful night at Martha's house, she traveled with Arthur in his comfortable truck, while Star followed in a specially adapted horse trailer. The morning sun illuminated an expansive property with immaculate stables, irrigated green pastures, and a main house that looked like something out of a storybook. "It's so green," Maria murmured, amazed at the contrast between the oasis Arthur had created and the surrounding desert. Several horses grazed peacefully in the fields, and staff waved respectfully as Arthur drove by. "Years of hard work and love for the land," Arthur replied, parking near the main stables. "My mother always said that where there's love, even the desert can bloom." As soon as they got out of the truck, a middle-aged woman wearing a white lab coat with the ranch logo hurried over. "Mr. Randolph, the news about Blackwell is all over the papers, and this must be our young hero." "Dr. Yasmin," Arthur introduced. "This is Maria." "Maria, Dr. Yasmin is our head veterinarian. She'll take care of Star and thoroughly examine the marks on his neck." The veterinarian smiled gently at Maria. "You did an amazing job looking after him on your journey. Now let us take care of you both." The next few hours were a whirlwind of activity, while Dr. Yasmin examined Star, documenting every mark and scratch for the case against Blackwell. A kind woman named Clara, whom Maria discovered was the housekeeper of the main house, showed her to her new room. "All yours," Clara said, opening the door to an airy room with A soft bed, a dresser, a desk, and most impressively a window overlooking the fields where the horses grazed. "The bathroom is through there," she pointed to a side door, "and I've set out some new clothes for you." Maria touched the bedspread with trembling fingers, hardly believing it was all real. On the desk were new notebooks, pencils, and even a few books with lots of pictures. "To get you started with your studies," Clara explained, with an understanding smile. After a comforting bath and clean clothes, Maria was taken to see the rest of the property. The ranch was larger than she had imagined, with specific areas for training, a small but well-equipped schoolhouse, housing for employees and their families, and even a complete veterinary clinic. "And this," Arthur said, leading her to a special stable near the main house, "will be Star's new home." The stall was spacious, clean, and airy, with a door that opened directly onto one of the green pastures. "He can be turned out in the pasture during the day," Arthur explained, "and you can visit him whenever you like. In fact," he smiled, pulling something from his pocket, "this is for you." Maria carefully took the small metal object. It was a key. "To Star's stall," Arthur continued. "You'll be responsible for him, along with our team. Dr. Yasmin will teach you all about horse care, and in your free time, you'll have classes at the school with the other children." The other children. Maria then noticed a small group shyly approaching the stable. They were children of employees, some appearing to be her age, others a bit older or younger. "You're not the only one who started a new life here," Arthur said softly. "Many of these children have also come from difficult situations. The ranch has been a refuge for them, just as it has been for so many horses." At that moment, Star, having finished his examination with Dr. Yasmin, entered the stable. His coat was clean and brushed, gleaming in the light streaming through the windows. He walked directly to Maria, nuzzling her shoulder in the gesture that had become his trademark of affection. "Tomorrow you start classes," Arthur said, "but today is for resting and getting familiar with your new home." He paused, watching Maria and Star with moist eyes. "You know, when Blackwell stole Star, I thought I'd lost not just a valuable horse, but a member of the family. I never imagined this terrible ordeal would bring us not only Star back, but also a new member for our family." Maria hugged Star's neck, letting her tears of happiness wet the horse's soft coat. The other children approached curiously, and she realized she wasn't just gaining a home. She was gaining an entire family with brothers, aunts, uncles, and friends. "Welcome to your new home, Maria," Arthur said, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. "May your journey here be as extraordinary as the one that brought you to us." 6 months had passed since that decisive afternoon at Martha's bakery. The late afternoon sun bathed Sunrise Ranch in a golden light, and Maria walked through the green pasture towards a lone tree that Arthur had planted especially for her, a symbolic replica of the one where her whole story with Star had begun. Her steps were now firm and confident, very different from the hesitant girl who had arrived at the ranch. She wore her school uniform with pride, and in her backpack, besides the book she was already beginning to read with growing fluency, she carried a journal where she recorded her daily journey of learning. Star grazed peacefully near the tree, his white coat gleaming in the setting sun. Seeing Maria approach, he lifted his head and nickered softly, the same gentle sound he had made at their first meeting in the desert. The marks on his neck had practically disappeared, replaced by new, healthy hair. "Hello, my friend," Maria whispered, hugging the horse's neck. Star responded by nuzzling her shoulder, his characteristic gesture of affection that never failed to warm the girls' heart. The sound of approaching hooves made them both lift their heads. Arthur rode up on his favorite horse, accompanied by Martha, who had become a frequent visitor to the ranch. The old woman, whom Maria now affectionately called Grandma Martha, always brought a basket of fresh bread and wonderful stories about desert horses. "Thought I'd find you two here," Arthur smiled, dismounting gracefully. "I have some important news to share." Maria helped Martha spread a blanket under the tree, where they sat to share the snack the old woman had brought. The aroma of fresh bread and mint tea mingled with the scent of wildflowers growing around the young tree. "Blackwell was convicted today," Arthur announced, his voice carrying a mixture of satisfaction and solemnity. The evidence was irrefutable, especially with Martha's photos and the testimony from Sarah's family. He'll lose a large part of his fortune in fines and reparations. Maria hugged her knees, processing the news. She didn't feel joy at Blackwell's suffering, but there was a sense of justice being done that brought peace to her heart. "But that's not the most important news," Arthur continued, his eyes shining. "The money from the fines will be used to create a rescue and rehabilitation program for both horses and children in vulnerable situations. We're going to expand the ranch, build more classrooms, more housing." Martha smiled, pouring tea into small cups. "And guess who's been chosen to be one of the junior mentors for the program?" Maria's eyes widened, hardly daring to believe it. "Me?" "You," Arthur confirmed. "No one better to teach about the special connection that can exist between humans and horses. Your story with Star has already inspired so many people. Now you can inspire even more." As if understanding the importance of the moment, Star ambled over, lying down on the grass beside Maria. Other horses grazed peacefully in the pasture, and in the distance, the laughter of children who now studied and lived at the ranch could be heard. "Remember what I said about my mother's gift?" Arthur asked, his voice soft. "About how she believed horses could see our soul. You have that same gift, Maria. I saw it the moment you arrived here with Star." Maria stroked Star's neck, recalling her extraordinary journey. "Sometimes it still feels like a dream," she confessed. "I wake up in the morning expecting to find myself on the streets, but then I hear Star Nicker." "It's not a dream," Martha said gently, taking her hand. "It's the result of the purest love, the kind that asks for nothing in return. You saved Star without expecting a reward, and that act of kindness transformed not only your life, but inspired a much greater change." The sun was beginning to set on the horizon, painting the sky with vibrant colors that recalled that first sunset in the desert, when Maria found a horse tied up and decided she couldn't just walk away. 3 new rescued horses arrived tomorrow," Arthur commented. "And next week, our first children from the new program. A new chapter is beginning." Maria smiled, feeling a deep joy fill her heart. Star lifted his head, his wise eyes reflecting the last ray of sunlight. On the horizon, soft clouds resembled the shape of horses galloping freely. "A new chapter," Maria repeated softly, "but the same story of love and hope." And there, under the tree that symbolized both the beginning and the continuation of her journey, Maria knew she had found not just a home, but her true purpose. Like Star, she had been rescued, and like him, she now had the chance to help rescue others. The circle was complete, but the story was far from over. It was just the beginning of a new adventure, one that promised more chapters of love, courage, and transformation.